I'm Dena, the founder of Refa'enu. Thank you for joining me for the study session, Finding Success Through Support. Before discussing Refa'enu's mood disorder support groups, I'm going to share a little of my backstory, because I really believe in the importance of sharing where a person is coming from in order to help connect with others who are going through similar things. I can't tell you how many times I've been candid about having bipolar disorder, only to have someone respond or contact me out of the blue even, to for the first time share their own experiences, whether with themselves or with a loved one, which they may not have even shared with friends or family members. Building a sense of understanding and connection, I believe, is so crucial in helping to combat mood disorders and the stigma and misunderstanding that surrounds them. So, that being said, I experienced my first major depressive episode at age 14 when I was in 10th grade. Of course, I didn't know it then. I was a naturally sensitive child and the creative and philosophical type. So while in retrospect, I can now describe the depression as a mood episode, at the time I thought I was just an overly moody teenager who wrote brooding poetry and was stuck on pondering the meaning of life and purpose of existence. Sure, I felt that what I was going through was different than my classmates and friends, but I didn't necessarily associate it with illness or disease. The best I could do to describe it was that I was sad and gloomy for no identifiable reason, and it was on me to get out of it. Even when I exhibited signs of anorexia, the concept of mental illness wasn't really in my lexicon, and it wasn't presented to me by anyone else as anything that much more than the trials and tribulations of adolescence. It wasn't looked at in this way by the school guidance department, which I went to after a friend expressed her concern over my well-being, or even looked at that way by my family, really. To be clear, I place no blame on family or friends for not seeing it for what it was. I think this is a huge point that is so crucial in the treatment and management of mood disorders. Vocabulary, language. If you don't know what you're looking at, if you don't have the understanding and vocabulary to describe what you're going through, it's so difficult to put what you're going through into words or coherent thoughts for others, or even for you, the one experiencing it, to understand. After 10th grade, I still had some ups and downs, plus a bad bout, so to speak, of bulimia on and off for a few years into college. In retrospect, the eating disorders were very tied to my mood. But like much of what I went through, I didn't understand this until years later. I had another major depressive episode during my junior year of college, and for the first time, I really started speaking with others about what I was going through. Some friends, and friends of friends who had gone through depressions and suicidality. The difference was that this time, we were speaking in the language of it being an illness, a mental disorder, not a moral weakness, not a character trait or character flaw, not a, well, I'm a writer, so I guess it comes with the territory kind of thing, but a real mental and physical illness that lives in the brain. One of the mental health professionals at the student center at school mentioned something about a cyclic nature to my moods, but she sort of said this in passing and never really followed up about it. I was given antidepressants, first Prozac, then later Zoloft when the Prozac wasn't as effective, and started to come to terms with the idea of living with a chronic illness that, though manageable, could not be outright cured. I graduated, started a career covering the book publishing industry, and at 23, married an incredibly loving and supportive husband. Less than a year later, though, something happened in the spring. I found out that a friend from college, who I had lost touch with, took his own life. My friend's suicide reached me in a way that none of my previous mood episodes ever had. For the first time, really, I started to see this illness outside of myself, not just something that really did a number on me, but that affected so many others and was simply not being addressed adequately anywhere, at least that I could see. I heard the words of my friend's family and friends who spoke about his giving and helpful nature towards others and his hands-on approach, which I too had witnessed as his friend, both personally and in his chosen fields of Jewish outreach and social justice. And yet how they said, if only he had been able to reach out for help for himself, for his own depressions. If only. If only. The seeds of an idea took form, and I soon started on a mission to recruit people to discuss in parlor meetings what we might do as a Jewish community to tackle the silence surrounding depression. Many people expressed interest in being involved, and I started forming ideas for an organization that would in some way address and educate about depression in the Jewish community. This was back in 2003. I was very enthusiastic about making this plan come into fruition. And I think it's really interesting from a clinical standpoint to look at life occurrences in retrospect and evaluate them in light of new evidence. Because in retrospect, I now understand that my enthusiasm and drive to get something done was certainly accompanied by a hypomania, which is really a heightened energy, a mild form of mania marked by elation and hyperactivity, which I never before had witnessed. It was another example of not having the knowledge or vocabulary to even identify it. Because what happened was, as winter approached, and I was coping with my friend's death, and the psychiatrist had upped the dosage of my antidepressant, and I was trying to start an organization from the ground up, I started to experience an episode that went far beyond the depressions and moodiness I had until that point encountered. The hypomanic drive that I had been feeling morphed into something else altogether. It involved both the overwhelming feelings of sadness and dread of depression, but it was also coupled with chaotic cycling and obsessive thoughts and agitated and negative energy. Only later did I understand this to be what is referred to as a mixed state, an episode that can occur in people who have bipolar disorder. It's kind of, in a nutshell, a combination of depression and mania occurring simultaneously. I learned later that it's actually a terribly dangerous state to be in, because not only do you have the negative thoughts and emotions of depression, but you also have the energy to act on that negativity. And thank God I didn't. I dropped my grand plans to start a program for depression in the Jewish community, though. It wasn't exactly in the cards at the time. Spring came again, and I was put on a mood stabilizer and diagnosed, mostly via my own research and observation, but then confirmed by the psychiatrist I was seeing, as having bipolar disorder, as opposed to major depressive disorder. Now, this is a huge difference, even though many symptoms of bipolar disorder overlap with depression. It's a big deal in terms of conceptualizing what a person is going through. And practically and crucially, it's a big deal because not only are different types of medication used to treat the two disorders, but also giving an antidepressant to someone who in actuality has underlying bipolar disorder can actually be very dangerous and contribute to triggering or worsening a bipolar episode. This may be part of what happened to me when, in conjunction with negative life events, I was given a higher dosage of an antidepressant. When the new meds, the mood stabilizer, started to work, my entire vision, both physical and metaphoric, began to get clearer, crisper, and brighter. My actual physical senses started to work better as the depression lifted and the chaos of the past season began to dissipate. In addition to the benefits of medication and therapy, I felt the need for something more. Some type of forum wherein I could express what I was going through, but with people who were really in the same boat, not just with a therapist who could help me in a professional capacity. I was living in Queens at the time, and a simple online search using the terms Mood Disorder Support Group and New York led me to the website for a nonprofit organization called MDSG, the Mood Disorders Support Group of New York. I learned that there were peer-led mood disorder support group meetings every Wednesday and Friday nights, as well as scattered lectures throughout the year given by various mental health professionals. I finally got up the courage to go to a Wednesday night meeting. It was hands down one of the best decisions I've ever made in my entire life. MDSG provided a few different groups. One was for people with unipolar depression. One was for people with bipolar disorder. There was a group for people under 30 who might have either diagnosis, but the joining factor there was that participants were going through similar life events and could relate. There was also a group for family members and loved ones of people with a mood disorder. And in the Friday night location, there was a newcomers group for first-timers. Each group was led by a trained peer facilitator, meaning that the person running the group was in the same boat, either living with a mood disorder or having a family member or other loved one with a mood disorder. What amazed me about the mood disorder support groups was how comforting it was to simply be in the same room as others who could empathize, let alone how helpful the actual conversations were for people in the group. I mean, mood disorders are such an internal and individualized thing. It's easy to get stuck with the idea that you're the only one in the world who feels the way you do. To a certain extent, yes, each person's experience is individual, but there are common denominators. There's something about being in a room with people who simply get it, even if they've had a different life situation than you. There's a sort of shorthand when you're conversing, because you don't have to work as hard to articulate how you're feeling to someone who has never experienced anything like depression or mania. You're with people who speak a common language. And there it is again, language, and the ability to communicate what you're going through. And even when you're not speaking, knowing that the people sitting right next to you understand you, that can be really comforting. It's the feeling of being understood, even when in a group of strangers, that is so powerful. This sense of community in the groups is really important. People can talk about common scenarios, like medication and therapy adherence, dealing with stigma, when or if to tell certain people about your diagnosis, how to navigate relationships, how to maintain a healthy outlook, all sorts of stuff. And very practically, the groups enabled me as a relative newcomer to the bipolar diagnosis to comprehend what I was going through more. You learn things from other participants, practical things. For example, types of therapy or scenarios a person might have with his or her therapist. What makes a good therapist? What makes a good therapist for you? What makes a good therapist for you at a given time? The answer will differ person to person, but being able to hear others express what they've gone through is not only supportive in that you might not feel so alone, but you also pick up ideas that are practical. When I started going to groups, I learned about different mood disorders literature that was helpful for people, types of medication, helpful practices to supplement medication and therapy. I also learned how important it is to be your own advocate. Help and assistance from others can be invaluable, but at the end of the day, you need to be educating yourself about what you've gone through, because you're the one living it 24/7. Among what I learned and continue to learn is how common different parts of my own unique scenario was. For example, major depressive disorder affects about 6.7% of adults in the United States. In 2014, an estimated 2 million adolescents aged 12 to 17 in the US had at least one major depressive episode in the past year with severe impairment. This number represented 8.2% of the US population aged 12 to 17. 50% to 75% of people with eating disorders have comorbid major depressive disorder or dysthymia. About 14% of people with bipolar disorder have an eating disorder. Bipolar disorder affects about 2.6% of adults in the US. And bipolar disorder is often misdiagnosed as unipolar depression. It's common to have a gap of 10 years between initial bipolar symptoms and accurate bipolar diagnosis and treatment. I also learned how important the trifecta of therapy, medication, and peer support is to maintenance and stability. I learned about different kinds of therapy, among others, talk therapy, cognitive behavioral therapy, dialectical behavioral therapy, and hypnotherapy. There are other kinds as well. Knowing what types of therapy are out there is important because at different points in time, you might benefit from one kind over another. I studied up on different types of medication used to treat mood disorders, chief among them different classes of antidepressants, mood stabilizers, neuroleptics, which are more commonly called antipsychotics, and anxiolytics, and which components of mood and temperament each type worked on. And on top of the therapy, medication, peer support trifecta, there are all types of self-care, supplemental treatments, and activities that can be helpful, such as, among others, proper sleep, exercise, nutrition, meditative activities, and creative therapies and activities like art, writing, and music. Soon after starting at MDSG, I was asked by one of the lead facilitators if I would be interested in training to become a facilitator. The groups are all peer run, but there are certain characteristics that a facilitator might notice in a participant that in conjunction with being a peer shows their ability to run a group. Things like ability to listen to differing opinions, ability to share one's own experience in a helpful, non-judgmental sort of way, ability to take on the responsibility of leading and navigating a group, and so forth. I agreed and soon underwent a training course that entailed classes with facilitators and mental health professionals on how to lead a group, psychoeducation courses from a noted psychopharmacologist on the basic ins and outs of mood disorders, and a big fat facilitator guidebook that included tips on leading groups and on different scenarios that come up within a group, as well as more psychoeducation and references to further reading. I facilitated frequently between 2004 and 2007 when I had my first child. And then again, after moving to North Jersey, in 2013, I was re-recruited by the original facilitator who recruited me, who was then head of the MDSG Board of Directors. During that time, I also started to re-examine my initial idea from years earlier to bring some sort of mood disorder education services to the Jewish community. As far as I've researched, mood disorders aren't more or less prevalent in the Jewish community than elsewhere. But like any community or demographic, there are differences in culture, practice, and belief that might lead some people to feel more comfortable communicating within their own, so to speak. There's also the community in which I grew up. I was raised modern Orthodox, but I felt it was important to cater to the Jewish community as a whole and not to a specific denomination. So, as a first step, in 2012, I started an online mood disorder support forum on Yahoo Groups, catered to the Jewish community, hoping to create a virtual, safe place for people to communicate with one another. But as it went, and maybe it also just wasn't the time for it, it wasn't exactly the right forum. There are benefits to being online, chief among them that you can participate from anywhere at any time. But it also means that each person is accessing the forum on their own time. And there isn't that same immediate conversational tone or supportive environment as if it were a group in person. But there was some conversation, and I think it did help people. And the group also received some coverage in the local paper. As time went on, I spoke with more and more people about the initial idea of creating a nonprofit organization. The initial concept had been bringing mood disorder education into Jewish schools and communities. But now, having also experienced the world of support groups, incorporating the support aspect into the organization became very important as well. So Refa'enu was finally created, and along with a very talented and wonderful board of directors, it was decided to start support groups as our first project, with school and community education very much our sister goal. Refa'enu's mood disorders support groups were modeled after the ones I attended and facilitated at MDSG, and perhaps similar to ones offered by the National Alliance on Mental Illness or the Depression and Bipolar Support Alliance, though more catered towards the Jewish community. We have one group for people who have a mood disorder, either depression or bipolar disorder, and one group for family members and other loved ones of people with mood disorders. Refa'enu groups involve trained peer facilitators, a designated time and location, and providing a respectful environment wherein people can feel heard and support one another. It's not group therapy. It's a meetup of people who have gone through similar experiences, who can gain strength, support, encouragement, and helpful ideas from sharing. Peer support groups can offer a unique opportunity for finding a sense of belonging as opposed to isolation, sharing experiences in a safe environment, providing a forum for those suffering from illness to feel heard and understood, and to find empathy, solace, and reassurance, revealing successful experiences with treatment and recovery approaches, and important long-term coping strategies, restoring self-respect, self-acceptance, and belief in the possibility of getting and staying well, and fostering hope and empowerment in an encouraging environment, encouraging the motivation and determination required for taking charge of the illness. Refa'enu's support group guidelines are as follows. Everything that is discussed in the meeting must remain confidential. Feedback is given by sharing experiences, not telling others what they should or should not do. Don't be judgmental of others. Treat one another with kindness, compassion, and respect. It's okay not to share. And it's everybody's responsibility to make the group a safe place to share. There are some common concerns that group attendees have expressed having before attending a Refa'enu meeting. Chief among them is confidentiality. Some people worry that others might find out about their condition, which may not be ideal in terms of other people's bias and the stigma associated with mental illness. As much as I wish it weren't so, bias does exist, both in personal relationships as well as on the work front. As stated in the guidelines, Refa'enu support groups have an absolute respect for confidentiality. Another concern that new members might have is not so much of a concern as a doubt about the possible effectiveness and helpfulness of a support group. I can tell you that after over a decade of participating in and running support groups, the potential benefits are immeasurable. There's also a ripple effect, wherein one person seeking his or her own support might say something that helps another member in a profound way. There's definitely a pay-it-forward vibe in the groups, where group participants help each other. I've collected some insight about the Refa'enu groups from some of our regular attendees. Some of the impact that support groups have had on participants include the following: that support groups remind us that we aren't alone. Participants can identify with other people dealing with similar issues and help them find practical answers to problems and concerns. Participants can speak openly about their experiences and challenges without worrying about feeling shamed or stigmatized. Support groups can offer a refuge from isolation caused by a person hiding his or her struggle with mental illness. Participants are reminded that, in addition to peer support, medication and therapy can be vital to maintaining mental health. Refa'enu support groups were developed with replication in mind. Practical aspects of creating a support group include logistical setup, advertising and publicity, peer facilitator sign-up and training, both on strategies for running a group, as well as psychoeducational background, and planning for and running the site and location each meeting. More information about our meetings can be found at www.refa'enu.org. And to discuss the possibility of starting a group in your area, please contact Dena at refa'enu.org. There's a quote that came to mind when I first tried starting the organization that is now Refa'enu, back in 2003, following my friend's death. My friend was involved in Jewish communal work, education, and social justice. The quote is from Ethics of Our Fathers and demonstrates the importance of personal responsibility in helping one another in some way, in the effort of tikkun olam, repairing the world. Lo alecha hamlacha legmor, v'lo ata ben chorin livatel mimena. You are not obligated to finish the work of repairing the world, but neither are you at liberty to desist from it. As is the Refa'enu mantra, the goal is to, together, heal our community from within. Please be in touch with any questions you may have.